It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. And hello, how are you guys doing this evening? Hopefully you all are doing well. I'm pretty good over here. You know, work is work. It's pretty busy, you know, about as busy as I want it to be. For the last month we had a lot of craziness going on. It's kind of tapering off and leveling out. I mean, we still have a lot of work and we're still behind, but we're catching up on a lot of our service calls. We had a good 2.5 week backlog of service calls that were not priorities, basically. You know, like when the customers called in and said, reach and coolers are down and stuff like that. Like, unless it was an emergency cooler, like we were putting those on hold because we had so many walk-in coolers, walk-in freezers, ice machines, air conditioners, so we prioritize our calls. So it really doesn't even matter. Like, if you put in a call and it's for like a door gasket or a door hinge or something like that, not closing, that goes to the bottom of my list. And I prioritize emergencies, entire dining rooms being warm, that kind of stuff. So I still have a few backlogged AC calls. We have a couple compressor change outs that I have a bar unit that a year ago, one of the compressors went bad and we just disconnected it. It was grounded. It has two compressors. And they've been, maintaining temperatures in there, so we haven't gotten to it. And I've gotten authorization from the customer. They said, just fix it, but I just haven't had time to go spend an entire day on the roof changing out a grounded compressor. And to top it all off, that particular grounded compressor is on a carrier package unit with a fixed orifice metering device, so good luck with that. That metering device is probably going to be plugged up. But that's a whole nother problem to have. So I will say that this week's video, I'll give you guys a little spoiler. This week's video is going to be pretty cool. I've already got it edited and done, and it's ready. I just need to kind of finalize some analytics stuff and, the thumbnail and things like that. But we have a carrier package unit that has a plugged up metering device, and it's the fixed orifice actuator style metering device. And we're going to be replacing that. So that's an interesting one. And it's really interesting because, of course, it didn't go as planned. And there was some hiccups and problems, and then there's a cool autopsy at the end. So stay tuned. It'll post Thursday afternoon at my normal time. My videos, if you don't notice, they post regularly. Like I have them scheduled to post. So my Thursday videos post at 11:45 a.m. Pacific time, and then my Sunday videos post at 5 a.m. Pacific time on Sundays. So that'll be, but the Thursday video will be the fixed orifice metering device. So that'll be a cool one. It was kind of a fun one to edit and everything, so it's pretty neat. And then I like the whole style of autopsying the parts. I can't always do that, but when I can go in there after the fact and autopsy why something failed, it just helps me as a technician better to understand exactly what's going on. It's really interesting because I found out something really interesting about the actuator style metering devices, the fixed orifice metering devices with the liquid headers on the carriers. There's actually I'll say it, but there's actually 2 orifices on that, about an inch apart, which is really interesting. And will also go prove my point that you can't. I mean, you can attempt to clear those metering devices, but it doesn't always work the way you think. And the fact that there's 2 of them there, about an inch apart, makes it even harder, because once you get through one orifice, there's going to be a pressure drop. And then it's going to be hard to build that pressure back up to get through the other orifice. So trying to clear it by heating it up and things like that. And I'll talk about it more in the video, but that'll be an interesting one. So stay tuned for this Thursday coming up. So I see a lot of cool people in the chat right now. As usual, if you guys have things you want me to talk about in the stream, put your questions or your comments in caps lock, okay? That helps myself and the moderators to see them and understand something, okay? And I'm specifically talking to one person. I'm not going to say his name, but you should know who you are. I don't always get to everybody's questions, bud, okay? Relax. There's nothing against you. I constantly go through the comments a lot of times at the end of the stream, and I read them. And there's one guy that constantly gets butthurt because I don't get to his questions. Bro, I'm not attacking you. I'm not ignoring you. Like, it's hard to get to all the questions. So if you have something I don't get to, you guys can email me at hvacrvideos@gmail.com, okay? And I'll try to get to them. But anyways, if you guys have things you want me to talk about, put them in caps lock, okay? The 98 DeVille, amazing. Thank you so much for that super chat. That is awesome. You guys, you do not have to do the super chats, but they are much appreciated. They definitely help the channel to keep going. You know, same thing with like the video support and stuff. I do have to say thank you. I have several YouTube channel members in here, several Patreon patrons in here, and those are just ways to support the channel monetarily. You basically commit to a monthly commitment of different amounts, depending on which program you go through. I think YouTube, I think even Patreon, I think you can pick what you want to do. But anyways, there's several people that choose to support the channel, and thank you guys so very much. Again, you guys don't have to do that stuff, but I do have to acknowledge the people that do. Another way, if you're interested in supporting the channel, is simply going to my website, hvacrvideos.com. We got merchandise available, hats and all that stuff. But guys, the easiest way, the easiest way to support the channel is simply just watch the videos from start to end without skipping through anything. That's the easiest way. You don't have to do anything except for just watch the video and just let everything happen the way that it's supposed to happen. That's the easiest way, okay? So, again, let's get on with it. I got a list of things I want to talk about, and then I definitely want to get to your questions. But the 98 DeVille, thank you so much for that super chat. And I saw another one come through too. Emiliano Saez, thank you so much for that super sticker, super chat, whatever it is. That's much appreciated, bud. I really, really appreciate it. I have to say that this weekend, I watched, what did I watch? Oh, shoot. Really cool Clint Eastwood movie. I'm a really big fan of Westerns. There's something about a Western. Like, I remember being a kid and my grandpa watching Westerns, and I hated them, right? Because they were so boring and so slow. But there's something about it as you get older. And even my wife is like, these are so slow. And it's like, but I appreciate the fact that they're so slow. There's a story here. They're not in a hurry to get to anywhere. And you just get to chill and watch it, you know? And I was watching the Clint Eastwood, what is it? The Josie Wales one. I can't remember the exact title, but whatever Josie Wales. Just such a great movie. Just so great. Just to be able to relax and you don't have to think. I think that's what it is. I think as an adult, when I get to shut my brain off and just not think but enjoy something, that's awesome, you know? So when I can sit down and watch a Western and just chill, have a drink, some chips or something like that, you know, and just watch it and not have to think too hard. I really appreciate that. It's just really cool. It's a nice way for me to relax. But all right. When the tweakers stole the copper, how much did that all cost? Michael. Well, I didn't sell the equipment. The customer buys the equipment themselves. So I basically just sold them the labor and all that stuff. But altogether, I did some estimations and added it up with what the customer spent on the equipment, upgrading the electrical like they had to do, and all my stuff and all the little things, getting the plumber involved and all that stuff. I believe that cost the restaurant around $75,000 for all 5 of those package units installed. Dealing with all the stuff that they had to deal with. So it was definitely crazy. And while you brought that up, that's a great point. I'm going to cross something off my list and let's talk about this too. Let me mark this one off. I had something on my list I wanted to talk about. Where's it at? Oh, okay. So I had a viewer. I'm not going to say his name, and I don't want to alienate him, but I definitely emailed him because he had emailed me, and I kind of wanted to address this. So I had a viewer that emailed me, and it was about the tweaker video, and he took offense to the fact that I was referring to them as tweakers and that I was upset with the fact that the tweakers had gotten on the roof. And in his email that he sent, I get it. I get why he was offended. Okay, he was offended because he had a friend who lost a battle to drug addiction. And I'm not going to go into crazy details, but he had a friend that lost a battle to drug addiction, and he had a hard time with the fact with me referring to him as a tweaker in a derogatory way, okay? While I understand on one side, you know, referring to him as a tweaker, I didn't mean any offense to his friend. I was using the term in general, but I kind of talked about this last week too, and I'll say it again. I've gone through issues with family members and drugs and different things like that. And I do not give them a pass. I love my family members. I love the people, right? And I miss the people, but the drug addiction gets in the way of our relationship. And to call that person a tweaker, okay, in general, the term tweaker is someone that, you know, is, you look it up on Urban Dictionary or something like that. But I mean, we refer to it as a drug addicted person that will do anything to get a fix, stealing stuff and all that good stuff, okay? I'm sorry to the person that emailed me, okay? I didn't mean to offend you, but I will stand my ground and say that I referred to these people as tweakers. It is what it is, okay? I could have said drug user. I could have said anything. It all means the same stuff. What I thought in my head, it doesn't matter what I called them. You know, down on their luck, drug addicted, tweakers, crackheads, whatever. It all means the same thing because I'm thinking it in my head and I was frustrated with that, okay? And I will say this too, because I got a lot of people that asked me, why was I frustrated? Why was I angry? Because I made a lot of money off of this job. And I'm going to tell you, and I said this last week and I'll say it again. The reason why I was frustrated was because my customer didn't plan for this. And this hurt my customer. I want to continue to work for my customer for a long time. I don't necessarily want to do these kind of jobs for my customer. I would rather fix and replace equipment that is ended its life cycle and the customer has planned to replace it. I don't want them to have to spend that money unplanned and unnecessarily because someone, whatever you want to call them, a tweaker, a drug addict, a crackhead, whatever, is down on their luck and decided they needed to damage their equipment so they could get their next fix, okay? That person is a thief. They stole. They are wrong. Okay. And it doesn't matter how big the customer is, how big of a corporation it is. None of that. Stealing is stealing. There's no justification whatsoever. I don't care how down on your luck you are or anything like that. Stealing is wrong in my book. And I teach my kids that, and I will continue to teach my kids that. So it is what it is. I'm going to get off that topic, but I did want to address that to the person that emailed me. I did not mean any offense directed towards you, but I will stand my ground, and I called that person a tweaker because that's exactly what they were. They were potentially a drug addict that was down on their luck, that got on the roof and stole a small amount of copper, cost the customer 75 grand for the, you know, $100, if that, in copper that they stole, right? And they damaged that equipment. So that person is a bad person. They were wrong for stealing, and it is what it is, okay? So that's it. That's my 2 cents on that, okay? Let's keep on going down the line. Would a compressor contactor be normally closed instead of normally open? Joe T. No, I can't see that a compressor contactor would be normally closed instead of normally open. I don't understand that. I mean, I'm not going to say that that's never going to happen, but I've never seen anything like that. So no, Joe, I don't know why that would be like that. I'd be kind of curious to see a schematic. If you want to send me a schematic of the unit that you're working on, then maybe it'll make more sense. Oftentimes they'll have other things. They'll have like a crankcase heater running through a small contactor that will be engaged when the compressor contactor is disengaged and things like that. So I'd be really interested in seeing the schematic of that equipment, Joe. Feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and then I can maybe understand a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and keep going down through. Let's see, what else do I got in here? What is my preferred leak detector? And that's Infinite Possibilities that asked me that question. I have 2 leak detectors on my van, the Fieldpiece DR82, and I have the Infocon Stratus or Detect Stratus, whatever you want to call it. Both of them are like, they perform equally in my opinion, okay? The Infocon Stratus or Detect Stratus is a lot more money than the Fieldpiece one. So I would probably have to say I'd lean more towards the Fieldpiece leak detector, but I keep 2 leak detectors on my van just so I have redundancy. I used to do that in the past. I got away from it for a while, but now I keep 2 just in case one dies or something happens. I have a backup one, and I have been going to the Fieldpiece one as my first go-to leak detector for sure. So let's see, Christopher Rogers. Yes, I did see your email. You emailed me about converting an AC to a heat pump. Did I see that? Yes, I did. It was a little bit difficult. I haven't had time to really answer that email. Just, you know, if I don't answer it in another week or 2 or something like that, send me another email and I'll try to respond. But that's kind of a hard one to answer. It was rather lengthy, so it'll take a little bit more than just a quick thing. Let's see. You emailed me once and never got an answer. I don't know who said that, but I saw it. Email me again, guys. I get hundreds of emails a week. I try to get to them, but I miss stuff, okay? I try to do everything that I can. Jose Rivera, I just saw that super chat come through. You're amazing. Thank you so very much, okay? My buddy Ralph is in here, Dallas fan. Ralph works for Honeywell Refrigerants, and Ralph is always willing to help people out when it comes to refrigerant-related questions, especially if you guys want to convert refrigerants over. You want to change from R22 to something else, 404 to something else. You're using R448A, and you want to know what the process is of going through the conversion, different things like that. Feel free to give my buddy Ralph an email. Again, he works for Honeywell Refrigerants. I just posted his email in the chat right now. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and knock this out really quick. Or actually, no, we're going to wait a minute because it's going to make things go crazy. So give me just a minute. Let me go through here. Do some refrigerators come with plugs? Steve the Traveler, I don't know what you mean by plugs, but try to get my attention again in the chat, or if any of the moderators see Steve answer that question to give me some context, that'll help. Let's see. Miguel Martinez, how many guys did I have on the job to repair all of that? We had 1 guy on the ground that you didn't see. We had 1, 2, 3 guys on the roof, and then the guy on the ground came up. So what is that? 1, 2, 3. So we have 4 people on that job to do those 5 ACs. Let's see what we got in here. Put in a Nordine defrost board, cost $75, charge $265 total. Did you screw yourself? R134A hole, I don't know, bud. It really depends on how much money you wanted to make from that job. You know, I don't know. It depends on what your overhead is. There's a lot of stuff going into that. You know, the details to that, you know, your fuel, your cost, your insurance rates. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a pricing a job, and it's rather complicated. So, would there still be bubbles in the sight glass if the vacuum wasn't properly pulled? Would there still be bubbles in the sight glass if the vacuum wasn't properly pulled? I want to say no. I wouldn't say that that's non-condensables. I mean, I guess there's a possibility, but I would imagine that you would see non-condensables in another way. So I don't think that you would see bubbles if you didn't pull a proper vacuum per se, but I could be wrong. Again, I'm not really thinking too hard about that question. So why would a system sight glass flashing but suction line is flooding back? That's a really easy answer, Vlad. If the suction... Okay, so first off, what do you mean by the suction line is flooding back? is it actually flooding? What does flooding mean? That means when the refrigerant is coming back as a liquid instead of a vapor. So the only way to know if the refrigerant was flooding back in the suction line would be to take a superheat reading, okay? If you have 0 degrees superheat, then you definitely have liquid refrigerant coming back to that compressor, okay? We typically want to see that superheat number get above about 6 degrees coming back on a walk-in freezer, 10 degrees on a walk-in cooler, and then air conditioners go higher and higher, okay? So, is it truly flooding back? I don't know. Or is it just that the temperature of the suction line is below the outside air temperature, so therefore you start condensating, you start sweating, you start having frost coming back. It really depends on what the temperature of the refrigerant coming back is, okay? So why is a system's sight glass flashing but the suction line is flooding back? Assuming that the suction line truly is flooding back, then your expansion valve is not regulating the refrigerant properly, and or your evaporator is not working correctly, okay? That's really a loaded question, okay? What is the purpose of a sight glass? And I kind of wanted to discuss this. The purpose of a sight glass is to give you a window into the system at that point in the system. So where could we use a sight glass? We could use a sight glass on a compressor to look at oil levels. We can use a sight glass on an oil sump, on an oil reservoir to see oil levels. Okay, so it's just a window at that point. We can put a sight glass on the liquid line to help us to know if we have a solid column of liquid at that point. Remember that. Because you can have a sight glass up on the roof at the condensing unit just coming out of the receiver, right? But then down at the evaporator, there could be a restriction somewhere in between and the gas could be flashing off. So you might not have a solid column of liquid going to your expansion valve. There's a sight glass can serve a couple different purposes too, because sight glasses can also have moisture indicators in them to let you know if there's moisture in the system or if the system's acidic. There's different things like that, okay? So remember, a sight glass is just a window into the system at that exact point in the system. In a perfect world, a sight glass is installed as close as possible to the expansion valve. That's not always practical. We typically have them up on the roof for charging purposes and different things like that. Now, I want to cover residential air conditioning and commercial air conditioning. Is a sight glass a good thing in residential and commercial air conditioning? And yes, it is a good thing, but you need to understand something. An expansion valve in a residential system needs a solid column of liquid going to it. Any expansion valve is meant to work with a solid column of liquid period going to that expansion valve, okay? But just because you have a clear sight glass on an air conditioner does not necessarily mean you have the right amount of refrigerant, because oftentimes manufacturers will oversize condensers and size evaporators accordingly, and in order to gain the efficiency that they design the unit to operate at, you have to add extra refrigerant. That's why on TXV systems, they will often tell you to charge by subcooling, okay? So if you put a sight glass on a air conditioning system, I would encourage any of you guys to do this, and it's a cool experiment, and you're charging up a system. Just throw on a sight glass. They're not that expensive, okay? You put it on install and clear the sight glass, okay? But then check your subcooling, and you will find typically that your subcooling is not what the manufacturer wants it to be, and you're going to have to add more refrigerant beyond just the clear sight glass, okay? So keep that in mind when you're dealing with air conditioning systems, and I've shown that a bunch of times. Now, another thing to understand on refrigeration systems too is that in refrigeration, we'll often tell our guys, clear the sight glass, and your charge should be close or within spec, okay? That's true, but it's not just as simple as clearing the sight glass. There's a lot of factors, and you have to look beyond just the sight glass, okay? If you're dealing with a walk-in cooler or a walk-in freezer or even a reach-in cooler, does it have a head pressure control valve? That'll require extra refrigerant beyond a sight glass being clear, okay? But in general, you also have to remember that you want to be careful clearing your sight glass when the system's under a really heavy load. You can potentially overcharge the system. So you always want to kind of just look at everything. It's not just as simple as looking at a sight glass when you're charging it and being done. You should be testing current on the compressor. You should be checking superheat at the evaporator. You should be checking superheat at the compressor. There's a lot of different things. Even though we don't use subcooling and refrigeration it's still a good metric, because subcooling will still tell us in a refrigeration system if we have a gross overcharge, meaning that we're way overcharged. So all the stuff comes into play. It's not just as simple as clearing a sight glass. So hopefully I answered that question for you, bud. Laska saying normally closed on a single pole contactor. Why would a system cyclist? I don't know exactly what that one means. Relays are common on that. Okay. I'm getting lost in the questions right now. If I missed your guys' stuff, let me know. Okay. Could you carbonate a beverage with R290? Could you carburate? No. Petition to start calling sight glasses monocles instead. I like that, Laska. That's a pretty cool one. We're going to call them monocles from now on. Let me see what else we got in here. I see a lot of cool people in here. Thanks, guys. It's so awesome and so humbling to have all you guys come in here and talk and just kind of help each other out. Do expansion valves just fail over time? A technician told me that they do. John Deere fan. No, not necessarily. I mean, you guys, actually, it's really cool. I do want to point out, you see my daughter made me that crane. That's like a Lego crane. It's really cool because you can operate it, but I actually have an expansion valve hanging from it right now. So let me grab it. So this is a Sporlan expansion valve, and there's really not a whole lot going on in here. Yes, I mean, after 100 years, 40 years or something like that, you know, maybe the springs would start to get weak. But the most common failure item on one of these expansion valves is typically the sensing bulb, because it may not be installed properly and it tends to rub out. Or if the sensing bulb rusts out, then it can lose its thermostatic charge that opens and close, or that opens the valve essentially. Okay, so this guy is the opening force pushing down on the spring. That the spring is counteracting that force, right? That's your superheat setting, and that's going to open and close the valve depending on the suction line temperature. Okay. So, I mean, yes, there's always the potential that this is going to fail over time, but majority of us, if these are installed properly, insulated properly, I almost dropped it, and set up properly, they're not going to have a very high failure rate. And there's not a whole lot inside this valve that's going to fail. Okay. And the cool thing about the Sporlan valves, one of my favorite features, is when the power head fails, because that's the most common item, because they typically will rust out because someone doesn't insulate them right, or the sensing bulb will rust out, you can just change just the power head. Easy as that. And clean the screen. This is a flare valve, so it would have a screen right here that would protect it. I actually have a screen from a different style expansion valve right here. I keep these in my truck, probably about 5 or 6 of them, so you can do hot swaps and change out the screen or the strainer. Hopefully that answered your question for you. Let me see what else we got in here. Would I recommend using swagers instead of crimping or elbow pieces? Well, anytime you can have less fittings on the system, the better. And the let me rephrase that. The least amount of fittings on a system, the better. Okay, when it comes to pressure drop and friction loss and different things like that, right? So as refrigerant turns around to 90, there's going to be a pressure drop essentially. Okay, so you know, you have to keep that in mind. So the least amount of fittings the possible, or the best, right? If you can bend your copper, it's going to be better than using a brazed on joint or even a pressed on joint, right? But there's times when that's not very practical. And there's also understanding that you know, we account typically for so many fittings within our line sets. Okay, so when you're dealing with residential and you're only going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 90s, it's not a big deal. Okay, when you get into refrigeration and you have hundreds of 90s in a supermarket case, right, that gets to be, each one of those is going to add to a potential pressure drop. So the least amount of fittings, the better, right? So if you can swage a fitting and make a bend instead of putting in an actual 90, of course, that's going to be better. Okay. So let me see what else we got in here. I'm like way behind on the comments. So do I always insulate the power head? No, not necessarily. It just depends on the situation. When I say insulated, I'm not always going to insulate it, but in certain situations, depending on the temperature of the valve, it's a low temp or something like that, it might be smart to insulate it. But then at the same time, the insulation can also hurt a valve too. So keep that in mind. Okay. I don't insulate a lot of valves on a walk-in freezer or anything like that. It doesn't really happen too much, but if it's outside of the space, right? Let's say that sometimes you'll see this. You'll see a walk-in freezer and you'll see someone install the expansion valve outside of the system, or you see it on ice machines a lot too, where it's running really low evaporator temperatures, but the expansion valve is located in a warm area. Then you're going to get a lot of condensation, and that's a time when you're going to want to insulate that expansion valve very well to prevent it from condensating so much and potentially rusting out the power head. Would be my advice on that one. All right, I need to get to a couple of the questions on my list right here too. So Nathan had asked me if it would be wise to add phase monitors to protect electrical equipment. And he's referring to my recent video where we had an electrical issue and then I had a bricked board or a locked up circuit board that I had to restore power to get it to reset. And then we also had the phase loss on the first AC, the bar AC, right? So he's asking, would it have been smart to go ahead and install a phase monitor in that situation? While I agree that a phase monitor is a good thing, okay, it's also going to increase nuisance service calls. I live in California. We have a lot of power issues. I would like to have a more automated power conditioning system that maybe will automatically reset certain conditions, or maybe you can remotely reset it. I feel like if I installed phase monitors at every one of my locations, my customers would hate me because I would be out there resetting those phase monitors constantly. Now, I realize that like on some of the ICM phase monitors, you can set up some automatic retries and different things like that. So yeah, I think a phase monitor would be a good thing, but you also have to understand if that customer isn't proactive about maintaining their equipment, sometimes it might just irritate them even more. So you got to kind of weigh that one out. So I'm going to mark that question off my list. And I will get to the chat here in just a few minutes too. David asks if I have tips. Actually, while we're doing the chat right now, so I want you guys to start chatting right now. My buddy Ralph wants me to go ahead and pick a few winners, and he's from Honeywell Refrigerants, right? I already gave the email earlier, and Ralph wants to go ahead and send you guys some Honeywell swag. So I'm sure it'll be all kinds of cool branded Honeywell stuff that he has. He sent me shirts and different things. So I'm sure Ralph will hook you guys up with different types of Honeywell swag. So I'm going to pull up the moderator bot, and we're going to pick 5 people. So I want you guys to start chatting right now. And I'm going to go ahead and change it and just start going crazy in the chat right now. And the moderator bot is going to pick 5 of you guys, and I'm going to name the names out. And then what I need you to do, the 5 of you that win, I need you to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, okay? And give me your name, your address, and your phone number, and my buddy Ralph will get and also your email address, and my buddy Ralph will get a hold of you and get you your swag sent out, okay? So go ahead and start chatting, and I'm going to pick 5 of you guys right now so we can go ahead and do this. So let me go ahead and pick the first one. The first winner of the Honeywell swag is going to be Brian Guze, Brianguze. Brian Guze is the first winner. Okay, so I'm going to write down your name. You are the first winner. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pick another winner right now. The next winner is going to be Maximum in the Hormone. That's a very interesting name. You are the second winner. Okay. Let me write that down. Make sure you guys reference what your screen name is or your username is on this, because I won't know your emails, okay? So make sure you reference what your screen name is or your thing. So Maximum in the Hormone, you're the second. Jackson Ray, you're the third. Jackson Ray. This is for some Honeywell swag that my buddy Ralph is going to send out. Jackson Ray, okay. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the fourth. The fourth person is Tyler HVACR Tech. Tyler HVACR Tech. You are the fourth winner. Okay. HVACR Tech. And I'm going to go ahead and pick one more winner. The fifth winner is going to be Tony Ask. Tony Ask. All right, remember, those of you that I named off, you guys need to send me emails to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Everybody can stop chatting. We're done. We picked the 5 winners. Tony Ask. So the 5 of you that I picked, you need to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. You need to have your name, your phone number, and your address and your email address. And make sure you tell me what your screen name was, because I wrote down your screen name. I'm not going to know your personal name, okay? So you need to make sure you reference that. And then I'll get that over to my buddy Ralph, and he'll send you out some cool swag, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get back to the normal live stream chat. You guys can stop blowing up the chat now. And let's go ahead and get to this. And again, thanks so much to my buddy Ralph at Honeywell Refrigerants. Ralph is the man. He's always willing to help everybody out. I'm going to go ahead and post Ralph's email address one more time in here. And let's see what else we got in here. Here's Ralph's email address. Again, if you guys have refrigerant-related questions, definitely ask Ralph, okay? All right, I need to get back to my list. So David had asked me a question about splitting condenser coils. Remember that most common condensers on residential and commercial systems, 4 tons and up, sometimes even 3 tons, have a double road condenser coil, okay? And so David had asked about tips when splitting the condensers because he's afraid he's going to damage them, okay? And that is a valid concern, okay? Because oftentimes these customers put them together and they're rather hokey, right? You really just got to kind of go for it, David. You kind of get comfortable with what can happen and what can't happen. Obviously, when you're splitting a condenser, you don't want to open it more than maybe an inch at the most. You don't want to go too far. It's not always going to be perfect. You're not going to be able to get in there and get every single thing, but that's where the chemical really comes into play, okay? So yes, he did also mention that on some of the condensers seem like they're kind of glued down to the protective pads on the bottom. And yeah, that kind of happens. You just got to kind of pry up on that very carefully. There's not a great way to do it. Usually put something underneath it, because oftentimes if you're on a package unit and you have to separate it and the package unit's kind of off the ground, you need something to support it so that way it's not dangling in the free air too. So I'm going to get to the chat. You don't purchase the said Honeywell swag, you win the said Honeywell swag. All right, let's see what else we got in here. Do old refrigerant charging cylinders have any use today? R134A hole. Yeah, they definitely do. I just think that our like the refrigerant charging cylinders like I have behind me, I honestly have never used one. That was not my dad's. That was one of my technicians gave that to me, okay? My dad did use them, but I didn't. So they basically came about when we did not have highly accurate digital scales. Okay, now we have super accurate digital scales. Of course, these are still good, but it's just not very practical to carry a giant glass cylinder around. You typically would have to transport that in a protective suitcase. You don't want to drop it because it'll shatter. There's a lot of potential of damage there, knocking it over when it's full of refrigerant, issues like that. So, I mean, I think that with modern digital scales, you don't really need those anymore, but you also need to know how to charge a system properly using hoses and or probes and a digital scale, and to account for line loss and different things like that. So I want to cover this one. This is a really interesting question. It feels kind of weird even talking about this, okay? But I'm going to say it. So Alex had asked me if he can shadow me for a few days to learn, and he says he would be willing to pay me, okay? So that's an interesting question, and while I'm flattered with that question, it's not very practical. And I actually get that question quite often from several people that have emailed me, asked me if they could come work with me, shadow me, pay me, all this different stuff. It's not really something that I could do due to insurance and liability reasons, okay? Someone riding in my vehicle is only covered if they're one of my employees. So that's kind of a gray area. I've thought about this, and it'd be interesting if someday I did some sort of consulting or something like that, where I'd go to them and maybe, would have to carry my own insurance, but then ride with them and different things like that. But it's just not something very practical that I have the means to be able to do anything like that right now. So I'm very flattered by the question, Alex, but it's just not something I can handle at the moment. Maybe someday we can set something up like that. But it just wouldn't work with my work schedule and stuff. I have an apprentice with me right now. I typically will have apprentices with me quite often, and it's just going to be hard for me to make that logistically work. So I apologize, but it's just not going to happen right now. Let's see. Do Sharkbite fittings work with aluminum tubing? You would have to read on the Sharkbite fitting. Now, let me ask you this, bud. Are you talking about the Zoomlock Max fittings? Okay, those aren't a Sharkbite fitting, but they also have the Zoomlock Max push fittings. You would need to read the nomenclature on those, the installation instructions, to find out if they work with aluminum. Honestly, I would think they would, but I'm not going to say yes or no from that, so you definitely want to read up on that. Understand that if you're using a press fitting, like the Zoomlock Max fitting and or a Zoomlock push fitting, there's a lot of prep that goes into that. If you're using a Zoomlock push, there's a lot of O-rings inside of that. Your copper needs to be deburred more so on the outside than on the inside. See, when we're doing copper brazing and stuff, we're worried about deburring the inside of the pipe to keep metal shavings down. While we're still worried about the metal shavings, the outside of the pipe actually has a sharp edge to it when you cut it, and pushing it in on the O-rings will actually tear the O-ring and cause refrigerant leaks. So there's actually quite a bit of prep that goes into using a press style fitting like the Zoom Lock Max fitting or the Zoom Lock push fitting. You need to use like a Scotch-Brite pad. You need to deburr it. You need to have a depth gauge to make sure it goes in the right length and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of prep that goes into that. All right, let me get to the question. Can I explain the evac process? Do I do decay test, and for how long? Nemesis Nugent. Yes, I do a decay test. So let's understand this. Evacuation process, right? We're evacuating air, contaminants, leftover vapor refrigerant, stuff that's trapped in the oil out of the system. We're pulling the system down to a proper micron level depending on what we're working on, okay? The rule of thumb, if you're working on an air conditioner, you want to pull it below 500 and you don't want your decay test to rise above 1,000, okay? If you're working on refrigeration medium temperature, you want to pull it below 500 and you don't want your decay test to rise above 1,000. If you're working on lower temperature like walk-in freezers and stuff, you typically want to pull down to the 200 to 400 level and you don't want your decay test to rise over the 500 to 800 level. So the decay test is an amount of time because naturally everything is always going to leak, okay? The 98 DeVille, I see that super chat. Thank you so very much. Please, guys, he made a great point. Smash the thumbs up button. We currently have 341 people watching this and 175 likes. So please smash the thumbs up button. Getting the views and the likes together really does help out, and I've noticed a significant difference since I started asking that, okay? It helps the channel to get recognized and everything, and you're in a way you're supporting the channel. So please smash the like button, okay? So the evacuation process. So after you evacuate a system, remember and understand that everything is going to leak, okay? You put a micron gauge on there. You have it installed properly in the right place. In a best case scenario, your micron gauge is not installed in your manifold gauge set, okay? Or if you do have it installed in there, you need to understand it's not going to be very accurate. It's not the best way to do a decay test or anything like that. Your micron gauge should be independently installed on the system, the furthest point away from the vacuum. So what I mean by that, let's just break it down to a residential air conditioner. Residential air conditioner is the simplest as possible. You have a condensing unit outside, you have a line set, you have an evaporator and a TXV typically, okay? You put your one hose on the liquid line and your other micron gauge should be on the opposite line, the suction line, okay? If you're doing a one hose pull, you pull all the refrigerant through the liquid line and it runs all the way through the evaporator, comes all the way back, and the micron gauge is on the furthest end away. You understand the furthest end away because you're pulling on the liquid line or the suction line either way, but you want to have the micron gauge on the other side of the system so it gets a true micron reading the furthest away from the pump. If you notice, I would encourage you guys to do this experiment. I've also shown this on videos too. Use a manifold gauge set that has a micron gauge in it. Hook it up, and what you're going to do is, if you understand the process hose, right, the yellow hose coming off the gauge is going to go to the vacuum pump. The micron gauge is going to be right after that yellow hose enters back into your manifold, and then the liquid and the suction line are going to, or liquid and suction or blue and red hose are going to come off that and go to the system. So the micron gauge is closer to that vacuum pump than the rest of the system. Therefore, that micron gauge is not going to be an accurate depiction or reading into the system. The micron gauge should be the furthest away, okay? I would encourage you guys to try that. Watch the micron gauge on the manifold gauge set and have an independent micron gauge the furthest away, and you're going to notice a significant difference. Even if you do a decay test and let the pressures equalize out, once you've done your vacuum, you're still going to notice that you're going to have a higher reading on your manifold gauge set, okay? But understand that even on a perfect system, you're always going to have leaks in it, okay? Now, we need to make sure that we have the least amount of leaks. There's always the decay test is testing the amount of rise in the system. So you typically want to do a decay test for 20 minutes or longer, okay? Depending on the manufacturer, some VRF systems might make you do a decay test for multiple hours, 24 hours, 48 hours. Depends on what you're working on that they want you to do the decay test. You can typically see it right away if you do an evacuation, and within 20 minutes, if your levels don't rise significantly, then you're probably pretty safe, but it's just a matter of whether the manufacturer wants documentation of a longer decay test. So, but that's where a pressure test comes into play too. If you do a pressure test before the evacuation, then you verified the pressure test to make sure that you don't have leaks, and then you do an evacuation, you know, then that helps you to understand it. All right, let me see what else we got going on in here. Does the new field piece micron gauge have a decay function on Measure Quick? No, the new field piece micron gauge does not work with Measure Quick, and I don't know if it's going to. You guys should probably reach out to Jim Bergman with Measure Quick and see if he plans on it. I thought I read something that said he wasn't going to make the micron gauge work with Measure Quick at all, but I could be wrong about that. Anthony, thank you so much for that super chat that just came through. That is amazing, and thank you so much for watching, bud. Okay. All right. So a viewer of mine, I'm going to protect his name, had asked me a question, and this is a really interesting question. I'm going to give you the most brutal and honest answer ever. I have no idea who this guy is, okay? But he said he has multiple certifications. He's finished school, right? But he, for the life of him, cannot land a job, and he doesn't know why he can't land a job, right? Anthony Herrera, thank you so very much for becoming a channel supporter, bud. That's much appreciated. So my random viewer is wondering, why can't he land a job if he has all these certifications and he's gone through schooling? Okay, I'm going to give you the most brutal and honest answer ever, bud. I don't know your situation. I don't know who you are, but I'm going to tell you to look at yourself from the outside looking in, okay? Oftentimes, employers, they can't be honest with you, especially Anthony, or the viewer, actually. It's not Anthony. That was the person that just became or just gave me a super chat. But the viewer that emailed me, look, he was in California, okay? And in California, employers are massively limited to the amount of things that they can say no to a potential employee for, right? So I may not want to hire you because of something I see in your mannerisms or the way that you carry yourself or something. I just get a feeling it's not a good thing. But you can't. You can't do it for those reasons, okay? Because there's discrimination things, there's all kinds of stuff. And while I say it's completely wrong to discriminate on someone because of race, color, creed, ethnicity, any of that stuff, of course that's wrong. But I'm just saying in general, maybe they just come across as a sketchy person. That's not a good reason to say you don't want to hire someone for, okay? Never will I say or encourage anybody to say anything wrong or to lie when they're doing that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying, in the state of California, we can't be honest, okay? So I'm not hiring you. I'm no affiliation with you. So I'm going to be honest with you right now and say that you need to look from within. Again, not knowing your story. What about you makes you not hireable? Okay, that's where I would look. If you've applied at multiple places as nobody's looking back, you need to look at yourself. Something about you. I don't know what it is. Do you not come across as a trustworthy person? Are you just not physically fit enough to work at that company? Do you not carry yourself well? I don't know. I don't know what your situation is, but if what you say is true and you have all these certifications and you think you know what you're doing, but you just can't get hired, and you need to look at yourself from the outside looking in. There's something going on there, bud. Okay, so that's the most brutal and honest answer I can give you. Again, I don't know your situation, but you know, that's what I would say. All right. If you don't have a receiver, is it still necessary to clear the sight glass? Rafael Gomez. That is a very loaded question. Okay, bud, because an expansion valve, no matter if you have a receiver or not, it still needs to have a solid column of liquid going to the expansion valve. But, okay, sometimes manufacturers beat to the tune of their own drum. So, okay, be cautious about that. Now, if a system has an expansion valve and does not have a receiver, that system better have an oversized condenser, because it has to have somewhere to store that extra refrigerant for when the expansion valve opens and closes. Because the concept of an expansion valve, again, right here, as it opens and closes, it requires more or less refrigerant in the system to make it work properly. But the system needs to have that extra refrigerant for it to open and close. It needs to be stored somewhere. And that's the purpose of a storage receiver, or a liquid line receiver, is a storage vessel for the extra refrigerant when the expansion valve doesn't need it to make the system operate properly. Okay, so you have some refrigeration systems, like little reach-in coolers, that don't have an expansion valve, but they're going to have an oversized condenser that has capacity or leftover space, basically, so that refrigerant can back up in that condenser. Okay, so no, you don't necessarily need to have a sight glass or necessarily clear the sight glass. I would just be very careful, Raphael. That's where you really start getting into OEM specific stuff. And sometimes manufacturers, they really do beat to the tune of their own drum. So be very cautious about adding sight glasses to systems that didn't come with them. Okay. Be very cautious about that. Matt had asked me a question. When walking up to a new refrigerator, how do I know what refrigerant's in it? And that's a really good question. And that's going to become even more and more difficult these days when you have all these different replacement refrigerants, right? They're phasing out 404, 410, 22. Basically, every refrigerant that's good and works is going out the door. And you're basically going to be left with water. And, you know, they say CO2 and propane, but those things are going to bounce too because, you know, to get propane or R290, you've got to it's a byproduct of oil production, right? Or gasoline production or whatever. So, you know, they don't like that stuff. They're getting rid of that. And CO2, they're talking about cow farts polluting the earth or atmosphere and crap too because of CO2 levels. So, I mean, they don't want CO2 either. So basically, you know, they don't want us to have anything. They don't want us to have refrigeration. They don't want us to have comfort cooling or anything like that. So I don't know. That's a whole nother topic. We don't need to get too political on that one. Let's see. So anyways, when Matt, to answer your question, how do I know what refrigerant's in it? There's a couple different things you can do. Number one, look at the data plate, okay? Knowing what oil is in the compressor doesn't really do very much these days anyways, because typically you're going to find polyester oil in most compressors, and you can have all kinds of different refrigerants in it, right? You can have R22 alternatives running in systems. So look at the expansion valve, the metering device if you're dealing with a refrigeration system, or lean on the manufacturer. That's why it's so important to label your equipment if you're doing refrigerant conversions. Make sure that you help the next guy out. Now I'm going to tell you guys a cool little thing. I don't think I'd get in trouble for this, but I ran into a situation where I accidentally added nitrogen to an air conditioner. And I don't know if I can make a video out of this or not. I have footage, but I don't know if it's going to edit down to a good video. So I'll tell you guys. I walked up to a system and it was a carrier package unit, and it had Cormax fittings, high flow Schrader cores. And I put my smart probes on it, and for some reason they weren't depressing the Schrader cores properly, but I didn't know that. So I had 0 PSI on the high side and the low side of all things, right? Long story short, the Schraders were actually bent on the inside, and the Schrader depressor was pushing down next to the Schrader depressor chingus, right? It was just out of whack. And the system did have refrigerant, right? But I started to look for a leak. I couldn't find a leak, so I added a bunch of nitrogen to the system, and then come to find out it finally depressed the Schrader, and I had a full charge in the system, but I had added nitrogen to it. So now I had a system that wasn't working. It had R22 in it, of all things, and I dumped in a bunch of nitrogen. And I was like, man, that sucks. I'm going to have to throw that gas away. But I didn't. I actually found a really cool way just using a pressure temperature chart. So while I was doing the repair on the system, I took that cylinder. I recovered all the gas from the system. I took that cylinder, set it in a bucket full of water, right? So that way I got a nice even liquid all the way around the tank, and I let it sit outside for 2 hours, and I put a digital gauge on it, and I used my pressure temperature chart. I took the temperature of the water, right, and looked at my pressure temperature chart, and I removed the vapor refrigerant off the top of that. Of course, I put it into a recovery cylinder, but I removed the vapor refrigerant off the top of that until my pressure temperature chart read what R22 should read at the water temperature that I was reading. So essentially, I bled off the nitrogen that I had accidentally put in that cylinder. We're using the concept of using the water to keep as much of that refrigerant in the liquid state, right? Keeping it in that. And then the vapor was just left on the top of the cylinder. And then basically I bled off the vapor until my pressure temperature, the temperature of the refrigerant essentially on my manifold gauge set read what the pressure temperature chart says R22 should be at that exact temperature. So if you guys ever run into that weird situation like I did where I accidentally put nitrogen in an R22 system and I didn't want to have the customer have to pay for 9 pounds of R22, I was able to salvage the refrigerant and get that excess nitrogen out. So that was a pretty cool little thing that I did, and I'm going to try to put that footage together if I can, but we'll see. All right, I'm going to go into the chat. See what we got going in here. What would happen if I don't lubricate the TXV power head before install? Nothing, Vlad. I mean, you know, they recommend that you put a drop of oil on there, but it's not really going to make a huge difference. So what do you need to convert R12 walk-in to 404A? QAISA. You need to convert your system to a new system, okay? Converting from R12 to 404A, Your line sizes are not going to be correct. The condenser size is not going to be correct. The evaporator is not going to be correct. There's just really no right way to convert a system from R12 to 404. You need to replace the entire system. The amount of work and effort you're going to put into making that conversion happen, it's just not going to be practical. So replace the entire system, whatever it is. Don't try to convert to 404. You can try to convert to a 12 replacement, but those are all being phased out and they're really, really expensive. Your best bet would probably be 134A. I don't know what the legality is of where you're at, if you can use 134A, but that's going to be your best bet to convert. But even that can be tricky too. So let's see what else we got in here. Why don't I use a pressure washer to clean condenser coils? Pat, I try to avoid them as much as possible because they can damage the condensers severely. So you have to be very careful when using pressure washers. Have I been close to throwing anything on the roof from frustration during a service call? I'm sure I have, bud, but that's not really something I can think of right now. I'm doing good. My buddy Rick is in here, HVACR Survival. I'm doing good, man. How are you doing? All right. Let's see. Answered that one. What will happen if copper fillings go in an AC system when you are deburring the tube? Potentially, if the Chad asked that question, if the liquid line filter dryer does not catch them, then they can get stuck in the expansion valve. They can get stuck in the distributor for the evaporator. They can wreak havoc on the system. They can plug things up and cause issues. So you want to make sure that metal shavings do not fall down in the system as much as possible. And if they do, let's just hope there's a filter dryer to catch it before it gets to anything it shouldn't. So let's see what else. I already answered that question. When Cali goes all electric, do I think R290 will be pushed out? Yeah, Scott, I think R290 will be, I think everything's going to be pushed out. California is going to be the first one because our yuppie cities get way crazy. Heck, in Northern California, up in Berkeley, which is one of the most yuppie cities in California you can find, new installations of residential housing tracts, they do not allow natural gas fired appliances in the homes. They want no natural gas ran to the house. They want all electric. We're not going to get political on this channel, but our electric grid sucks here. We're running out of electricity. Okay. We get our electricity from, all kinds of crazy places that they're trying to phase out to. They get some of it from, well, I don't even know, but yeah, it's just a mess. So yeah, it's crazy. All right. Let me see what else we got going on in here. All right. Preferred tool for bending. I like the Yellow Jacket ratchet bender. And then I have some Ritchie or Yellow Jacket hand benders that I love for 3/8 and 1/4 inch for sure. What type of call job do I consider the most frustrating? The most frustrating is callbacks where I'm going and fixing another technician's issues that they couldn't figure out. I mean, while they're fun and in the end you look back and you reflect and think that was really cool when you figure it out. But callbacks are the worst because when I walk in the door and one of my other techs has already been there, my customer sees me, and then if I end up fixing it, then they think badly of my other technician. And as a business owner, that sucks. So I hate doing callbacks on other technicians because it just looks bad on that technician. I prefer the technician who went out there to do his own callbacks, but sometimes maybe he couldn't figure it out and I need to go help. But I just hate walking in the door because when the customers see me, they're like, yay, it's going to get fixed. And it's like, I hate that feeling. It's a bummer. Let me see. Nick had asked me a question about circuit boards, and he was curious. It sounds like Nick might be a computer guy or something like that, because he asked me if I ever go crazy into the circuit boards to see if the actual delivered voltage is being stepped down to the circuit board's required voltage. So oftentimes they'll have resistors or all kinds of different things that are going to change the voltage to, give some kind of DC. They might rectify it doing weird things, right? So he's asking, do I ever get that deep into circuit boards to see if a component in the circuit board has failed? No, I don't, okay? If a circuit board has proper voltage going into it and it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, that's it. I don't try to repair it. I don't try to figure out why it failed in the circuit board. Occasionally I'll look for burnt solder spots on the back, but I'm not going to repair it, okay? The circuit board needs to be replaced. My time is too valuable and I don't have time for that kind of stuff. If I try to repair a circuit board and it fails again, the customer gets mad at me. Well, versus if I go in, find out that it has the proper voltage or it doesn't, and I fix that problem, then the circuit board has failed. I change it with an OEM circuit board and call it a day. I don't have time to get into the nitty gritty to find out what's going on in that circuit board. I don't try to repair circuit boards or anything like that. It's just not practical. And it just doesn't make sense for me as a business to do that. So, All right, I'm going to cover that one, and I'm going to cover that one on my list and narc them off. Okay. Okay, the biggest question that I've been getting on my tweaker video, okay, happens ridiculously a lot, is why the heck did I put copper drain lines back in on that system if the tweakers went up there and stole the copper? Why would I go back in with copper, okay? Why not use PVC? PVC seems so much smarter to use. In California, not even just in California, I hate PVC. PVC, when it sits in the sun, with our UV exposure and everything, it gets brittle and it breaks. There's nothing worse than someone dragging their hoses across the roof and shattering a PVC drain line, and then it falls below the roof deck. It just wreaks havoc. California has a code requirement that we drain our condensate drains to the sewer. We do not drain them on the roof because they would potentially go into the parking lots, go into the flood control channels, and go into the ocean. We have to drain our condensate into the sewer so that way it can get treated properly, because all of our water goes to the ocean, okay? And they want to make sure that the water is clean before it goes to the ocean. Sometimes the condensate or the runoff from the storm drains and stuff does not necessarily get treated, and it goes directly to the ocean. So they always want us to plumb our drain lines into the sewer. So that answers that question too. But I just prefer using copper, okay? Now, if we had a repeat occurrence over and over and over again where they damage the ACs, then of course I would talk to the customer, but I prefer to stay away from PVC whenever possible. And that includes ice machines or anything. It just becomes a headache later. Another question I get all the time: why don't I use a GoPro when I'm filming? It seems so much smarter if I used a GoPro and put it on a chest mount or a head mount. Number one, I look like a dodo head walking around with a damn GoPro on my head or on my chest, right? And if I was on the roof all by myself and my customer never saw me, then maybe, okay? But I have to go up and down to the customer, and it's just, I don't want to have to take that off. I don't want extra crap on my head. Number two, I get motion sickness. When I'm editing my videos, GoPro footage is just different. And walking around with GoPro, even walking around with my camera. Heck, editing my AC video, when I was spinning around the show in the ACs, that made me all nauseous, okay? So I don't like that. I just don't like footage from GoPros when people are walking around and stuff. Now, I do have GoPros. I keep two in my truck and I use them occasionally. Like in the AC video, I set up GoPros on the AC, but I'm not walking around with me on my person. It's just not practical, and I don't want to look like a dodo head with a damn GoPro strapped to my head. So that's why I don't use a GoPro. All right, I'm going to get to the chat right now, and I got a few more questions in my thing. Have I looked into the new press fittings for refrigeration? Thoughts? Whiz Kid Drummer. Yes, I have a couple videos using the Zoom Lock Max press to connect fittings. So yes, I have used them. They have a time and place. I don't use them on every one of my jobs, but I do like them, and they have proven to be trustworthy, at least for me. I have a Zoom Lock Max install where I did a walk-in cooler. It's been for over a year, maybe a year and a half. And then I have another one that I just did, I don't know, 6 months ago, that has a ton of fittings on it, and that one's been going for about 6 months. So far so good. I've heard of a lot of other people that swear by the press fittings. It's all in the prep, okay? If you don't prep them right, they're gonna leak, okay? Determined. You have to use the depth gauges. You have to do everything right by the prep. And I'm gonna be out front and honest with you guys. Majority of the time, on most regular installs that I would be doing, the Zoom Lock Max is not necessarily going to save me time, okay? It's going to take me almost just as long because of all the prep and deburring and everything you have to do, and verifying that the depth is correct and marking it and all that stuff. But it is going to save you from having to braze in weird tight places or having to pull fire permits and different things like that. So yes, I do like the Zoom Lock Max fittings, but I'm not going to say that I'm going to use those and I'm never going to braze again. No, I'm going to continue to braze my fittings in. But given the opportunity in a right situation, I'm going to use the press to connect Zoom Lock Max fittings for sure. Let's see what else we got in here. Boss doesn't want to use brightener, but the coil is dirty after cleaning. What can you use instead? Samuel Eddy, don't focus on the coil being shiny, okay? Shiny just means, okay, understand something. When you use brightener, okay, brightener is an acid. It actually takes the top layer of the aluminum fins off. That's why it's shiny, because you literally took the top layer of the metal off. So brightener, don't look for shiny, look for penetration. If you're going to use the brightener cleaner, that's the best thing to degrease a coil to get really deep down inside and it foams really well, right? but you understand that every time you're using that, you're disintegrating that coil a little bit more, okay? The best cleaner to use would be the Hvacr HD cleaner or the yellow Venom pack, okay? Those are not corrosive to the metals at all. It's just soap. It'll break down the stuff, but it's going to take a few more coatings. You're going to have to do it a couple times, but it's not going to make the coil shiny like most people think they need to see. A shiny coil isn't necessarily correct, okay? You know, after years of time, those coils are going to tarnish and they're going to have a darker color to them, and it is what it is. As long as you can see through it, as long as you have water flowing through it, then the air can pass through it. So don't be so concerned with a shiny coil versus a clean coil. And also understand something. Clean means clean. Okay, don't go in there and just rinse off the outside and say it's clean. No, clean means that the water is going all the way through the coil at the same flow rate all the way across the coil. You start at one side and it kind of trickles through, but then you go to the middle and it comes through really fast. That means that the side that you started on is still dirty. You need to do something to break down that dirt and that grime that's in there and make sure that it penetrates all the way through. Okay, let's see what else we got in here. Let's see. You were working on this broken 15-year-old Manitowoc ice machine. Can't even get parts, but don't want to replace. Yeah, that's a hard one when the customers don't want to replace it. In that situation, I'm not going to try to make anything work, and I'm going to force my customer's hand to replace it is what I'm going to do. So basically, I'm just going to tell them I can't get parts anymore, you know, and I don't feel comfortable using aftermarket parts. So they got a choice to make. Call someone else or replace it. Let's see what else you got. Is that compressor analyzer I have on my shelf? Yes, it is. I have I have one compressor analyzer there, and then the other one's actually not up there. But that is an old A1 Annie on the right. I've never used that one. One of my service technicians actually got that at a garage sale and gave it to me. And then to the left of it was my dad's old Simpson 260 meter. And then if you guys haven't already seen too, I showed it in the very beginning. My daughter made this Lego Technique crane. I actually bought it and she built it for me yesterday. It's really cool. I actually had a TXV hanging from it, but you can adjust everything. It has outriggers. You can adjust the boom. It's really, really neat. I really like playing with that thing. And I just walked in the door and she had it sitting on my desk. Like she had just finished it today. So that's really cool. This is a question I get a lot, guys, and I have it on my list of things to talk about. Scott, thank you so much for that super chat, bud. I really appreciate it. That's amazing. And guys, please smash the thumbs up button. We have 405 people watching and 256 likes. Try to get that like count equal to the amount of people watching. That would be much appreciated. But Scott, that super chat, bud, wow, that is amazing. Again, I said this in the beginning. I appreciate any support you guys give. The easiest way to support this channel, though, guys, is simply just watch the videos from start to end without skipping through anything. That's the easiest way. I said it in the beginning, too. There's other ways to support it via super chats. You can become a YouTube channel member, a Patreon patron. There's in the show notes of this video is links to all this. You can donate via PayPal. You can support the channel by going to my website, hvacrvideos.com. We got hats, beanies, sweaters, all that stuff. Also, if you guys are interested, if you guys want to purchase any tools, you can go to truetech-tools.com and you can actually use my offer code BIGPICTURE, one word, and you can get an 8% discount as of today. I say that because it may change tomorrow, but as of today, you get an 8% discount. If you guys know what you're going to purchase from TrueTech Tools, shoot me over an email and let me know, and I can generate an affiliate link. You still get to use the 8% discount code, but I get a little bit of an extra commission when you do that, and it just helps to support it a little bit more. So, but that's awesome. But again, if you guys don't support the channel, I'm still going to make these videos. It's much appreciated, and I just have to acknowledge all the awesome people that are Patreon patrons and YouTube channel members. You guys are amazing, and you go unnoticed because I don't acknowledge you guys enough, okay? So thank you so much to all the people that have become that. So do I have an obligation to report my customers for health code violations? I'm going to tell you right now, no. Okay. I'm not in the business of reporting my customers for health code violations. I do not work for horribly disgusting customers. Now, every once in a while, there's something gross in a restaurant, but what the general public thinks is nasty typically isn't. Okay. If I find myself working for a customer that is constantly doing things that I find to be disgusting, then I will fire that customer, and I have done that in the past, okay? But for the most part, what the general public thinks is nasty really isn't that bad, and it's very common, okay? So I do not have an obligation to report my customers to the health department, and if I was in business doing that, I would be alienating myself really quick. The moment that I reported one customer and they found out it was me, they would start telling all my other customers, and I wouldn't be in business anymore. So I stay in my lane, keep my visor down, do what I'm there to do. And if I do see things that are wrong, I report it to management. And then if they don't start bringing that up, I bring it to corporate's attention. And then if they don't take care of it and I find it to be disgusting, then it's time to start thinking about firing that customer. But in no way, even if I decided to fire a customer, am I going to report someone to the health department? No, that's not my job. I'm not there to do that. I'm there to fix broken crap. I'm not there to get involved in legal, political drama stuff. Gabe had asked me a question about when I'm doing evacuation. He uses a ball valve to valve off his micron gauge. And he was curious because he never sees me using a ball valve, and he wants to know how I get my micron gauge off before I charge the system. And I don't, because the micron gauge that I use most often is the Blue Vac Professional, and it can handle positive pressure. So I don't take my micron gauge off the system until I've put refrigerant in it and it's come up to positive pressure on the side that the evacuation or the micron gauge is on, okay? So I leave the micron gauge there, charge the system up, or put some gas in there. When I see positive pressure, then I take the micron gauge off, then I continue adding refrigerant to the system. All right, so that one's that. Let me get to the chat and see what I'm missing. Video of building Lego technique? No, but my daughter is making a YouTube channel. She's all excited about it, and she's going to start building Legos, so that's her thing. She's all excited, but not building the technique one. Aside from HVAC, do I invest in the stock market or cryptos? I do invest in the stock market. I'm not very, I don't have time to pay much attention. So I have a little bit of money in the stock market. I have a little bit of money in crypto. Honestly, my crypto stuff is not doing very well, and I'm looking for an excuse to get out of my crypto, but I'm so negative right now that I need to build it back up before I get out of my crypto. I would be interested in setting up a mining rig if I could find one that's easy and cheap to set up, but I don't know if I'm going to be dumping my money into crypto anymore. Honestly, I'd rather find a financial advisor that can help me and help me a little bit more and be more educated. I try to stay in my lane. I've been trying to do my own financial stuff for a while, and I'm not seeing the return that I'd like to see. So I'd rather kind of give it to someone that knows what they're doing, that I pay to give me returns and stuff. But yes, I do invest in a little bit of crypto, and I do have some money in the stock market, yes. And then, of course, 401k and all that crap. So if I retire, will I have anything to post on this channel after? Yeah, that'd be interesting. No, because I need work to make these videos. So yeah, not at this time, no. Let me see what else we got in here. And yes, I saw someone in here say snitches get stitches. That is absolutely true. So let's see what else we got in here. Let's see, watch, listen, pay attention. Maggots on evaporators, John Cruz. So I did have an ice machine that had maggots in it, and I reported that to the customer. I immediately disposed of all their ice. They were totally okay with that. They got the pest control company out there. They addressed the issue. We cleaned the ice machine. We sanitized it. And we solved the problem. See, stuff happens at every restaurant that people don't even know. Okay, rodents and bugs in restaurants is a normal thing. If a restaurant doesn't have rodents and bugs out in the back dock or anything, I mean, it's not going to happen anywhere. Anytime you're in a city, there's going to be rodents and stuff. It's what the restaurant does to mitigate those problems, in my opinion, that matters. Quays A, thank you so much for that super chat, bud. That is amazing. So it says, you learned so much from me. You own a retail store and you have a lot of cooler. You have been maintaining them for a year now, thanks to me. Okay, so here's the deal. I appreciate the fact that you are intuitive enough to try to figure out how to maintain your own equipment. Now, I will be honest and say that my channel is not necessarily meant to replace a service technician. Never do I want to take away a service technician's job, but I also realize that there is intuitive people out there that even without my channel would have figured out how to clean their own condensers and maintain their own equipment. Okay, so I appreciate the fact that you are smart enough to maintain your own equipment. I would encourage you to also understand and know when it's time to call in a service technician to do a major repair. But of course, I mean, I do minor repair work to my own car, right? I do minor repair work to my own washer and dryer or my stove or my refrigerator, but that's not necessarily my area. I cut my own grass. I fix my own sprinklers. So while I don't want to take another service technician's job when it comes to HVAC, there's intuitive people that are going to find these videos, and I get it. They're going to watch them and learn a little bit, but I never give all the information in my videos purposely because I don't want someone to hurt themselves and I don't want someone to get involved in way over their head. But that's awesome, bud, that you do that, and thank you so very much for that super chat, okay? All right. What else do we got in here? Sometimes you like the flavored windows. Short bus riding, Hugo. Okay. That's a funny comment, Jason. I don't know the context to it, but I like the fact that you lick the windows. So that's really cool. 134A hole says, bye, 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 bye. And I'm assuming you're talking to crypto. Invest in an annuity. You did. Yeah, definitely, John Cruz. All right, let's see what else we got in here. Chris, you start your career in HVAC in 1 week, and do I have any tips about starting out with a company? HVAC with Greg. Good for you, bud. So yeah, tips for starting out is just keep your mouth shut, keep your eyes open, and keep your ears open. Okay. What I mean by that is when you go to work, you need to know when to ask questions. You need to pay attention. Research. When you go home, you're not off work. When you go home is the time that you start researching all the really cool stuff that you saw when you were at work that day. Okay, that's the best advice I can give you. Let's see what else we got in here. K&S Air Conditioning is hiring. Call and ask for Jeff. Miguel Martinez said so. Right on. Have I seen the resistor TXV control on Linux package units? Cyborg Chic. No, I have not seen that yet. Let's see. A lot of people believe when they get food poisoning from a restaurant, it's from bad food, but it can be from moldy ice machines. Definitely. Did I ever use the B tank instead of oxyacetylene? No, I have not. Do I fix domestic refrigerators? No, I'm a commercial refrigeration guy. I'll fix my own domestic refrigerator. That's it. Do I ever enjoy taking service calls to escape the owner's side for a couple hours? DC Dreamer 45. I despise working in the office. I hate dealing with owner crap. I hate dealing with all the crap we have to deal with, insurance and taxes and all that stuff. My favorite part about owning a business is fixing things. So when I am stressed out, when I'm having to deal with office crap and do quotes and bids all day and emails and everything, the biggest relief for me is to go run service calls. I love running service calls. So if I'm just stressed to the max, I just need to go out and run a service call by myself in peace and go to town. Now, the way that I operate my company, I spend more time in the field than I do in the office, okay? Luckily, I have my dad as my partner who works in the office with me. My dad hasn't worked in the field for years, so he helps me out in the office. We do that. We have a secretary too. So I would say 80% in the office, 80% in the field, 85% in the field, 20% in the office, or 15, whatever the math is on that. Pressure limiting expansion valves. What are they useful for? Samuel Eddy. So I recently had an air conditioner that I made a video about. The title of the video is called It's Dying a Slow Death. And the air conditioner, long story short, we use 100% outside air on that air conditioner. So it brings in 115 degree outside air into the return airstream. The evaporator is heavily overloaded, and it has pressure limiting expansion valves on it. So my suction pressure never gets above 80 PSI for R22, okay? The pressure limiting valve reduces the load on the compressors. Pressure limiting valves are very useful. A pressure limiting valve, not my favorite, but another use for it is on a walk-in freezer system that has hot pull downs, meaning they bring a lot of product into the box or something like that. I prefer not to use a pressure limiting expansion valve on a walk-in freezer because a crankcase pressure regulator is much better in my opinion because it's adjustable. But that's another situation on a walk-in freezer, so you don't overload your compressor when you bring in hot product into the box and different things like that. So pressure limiting valves do have a purpose. They are cool. I prefer pressure limiting valves on air conditioners, not so much on refrigeration. Let's see what else we got in here. Can you get a Q&A with my dad? It's just not something he's really interested in. Hit the thumbs up button to help with my coke nose rehab. Yeah, I do have the coke nose occasionally where I start itching it. I haven't had that in a while, though. Medi Curb. His kids say that they would watch the Lego channel. Right on. Well, if I decide that I want to make my daughter's Lego channel public besides just her friends, then I will definitely share the link. So, yes, especially with shutoffs to isolate either end. Yeah. What's my warranty on service calls and fixes? I have a 90-day labor warranty, and then I honor the manufacturer's part warranty. So if the manufacturer has a 6-month warranty on the part, then I give the customer a 6-month part warranty. Whatever the manufacturer does, I extend that to the customer. As far as my labor, I warranty my labor and my workmanship for 90 days, but I'll be fair. If I'm out there 12 months later and I see a braze joint that I clearly didn't do well, I'm going to take care of the customer, okay? Because if the customer's happy, I'm happy. All right, let's see what else. He says, as it rubs his nose, suspicious. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. You need another hat. Go check out hvacrvideos.com, bud. Lots of hats available on there. All right. So, I am out of stuff to talk about. So if you guys got more questions, you definitely need to put it into there. I will definitely try to get to it. Remember to put your questions in caps lock. Let me check my phone for notifications right now because I have a few of them. Okay, that's cool. I got emails right on. Awesome. Everything looks good. Cool. All right. Did someone say Coke nose? Yep. You know. All right. Well, I'll give it another couple minutes here. One thing I do want to talk about. So I had said I made a social media post, and this was a frustrating one. Okay. I stopped asking customers a long time ago. Oh, that's a good question. I'll answer that one in a minute. So I stopped asking my customers a long time ago how long equipment has been down, but I got to read you guys something. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen this post, okay? If not, I'll tell you. So my customer sent me a service request through email, and this is their description. Our walk-in freezer is temping at 50 degrees. We were having an issue with it holding temperature for the last 2 days, but I hoped that keeping the door shut, it would go down. The lowest temp it has seen in the last 2 days is 32 degrees, so a lot of product isn't staying frozen. They called me out on a weekend. It was either a Saturday or Sunday on overtime. I had to stop what I was doing to go out for that service call. I would have rather not known that it had been down for 2 days and just gotten a service call to go out there. That is incompetence. Customer thinks that they're going to keep the door shut for 2 days and the box temperature doesn't drop. I had a discussion with my customer when I walked in and I said, look, if your box goes 10 degrees above the normal temperature for more than an hour, it's broken and you're not going to fix it by keeping the door shut. Call me. Like, don't do that kind of silly stuff. And that was frustrating, man. Seriously, to be so blatant in the email and say it's been down for 2 days, but I need you to stop what you're doing, stop eating your dinner and get over here now because it's an emergency. Like, I had to bite my tongue big time going out to that service call for sure. So the question that I saw was the Chosen Hitman said, do I have to worry about contaminating my equipment with different refrigerants I use? No, I'm not worried about it at all. Okay. There was a misconception in the very beginning in the when polyester oil was rolling out that, oh my gosh, polyester oil doesn't mix with mineral oil and it's going to cause contamination issues. It's not that big of a deal. Okay. Of course, it doesn't move correctly. You don't want to mix polyester and mineral because it doesn't really mix right and it's going to be separated, but it's not going to contaminate anything. Okay. I use the same set of gauges, the same set of probes for every refrigerant from R290 all the way to the other ones. Another question that I saw Chad asked, what flavors of refrigerant do I work with? So on my truck right now, I have R22, 404, 134A, 410A, 448A, R290. Those are the refrigerants that I have on my truck and all my service technicians have on their truck. I also have a drum of 502 sitting in the shop. I have a drum of 409A sitting in the shop. A drum of 414B, which is hot shot. But I don't use those very often at all. Okay, so the common refrigerants are those ones that I listed. What else do we got in here? Best way to clean a system after a flush is don't flush it. If you're going to do a conversion or something like that, purge the system with nitrogen. I'm not a huge fan of using any kind of flush because they can leave stuff in the system and I just don't like them. Okay, so proper dryers, oil changes, and dryer replacements after the fact. Okay, so let the dryers do the work, come back and change the dryers, purge the system with nitrogen, do your best, try to replace whatever you can. If you're changing line sets and stuff, it's best to change the line set as much as possible. Let's see, Chris O'Day, thank you so much for that super chat, bud. That is amazing. Where do I get the R290 holder? Scott is asking me. So that is actually a really hard thing to get. The R290 holder came as part of a kit from iCore Refrigerants. I bought some R290 from my local supply house. It came with a box and everything, and it came with this little vinyl cardboard looking thing that had Velcro on the back that holds the tank up. Where do I get that? They don't make that kit anymore, so I don't know, man. You'd have to make it. I mean, one could easily go to a stainless steel shop and have them make like a little stand or something like that. One of my technicians just picked up the new one of those charging scales that the cylinder screws into. I've yet to see it, but he said it was pretty cool, and then you don't have to worry about anything because the cylinder screws into the middle of the scale, and then it just weighs the refrigerant in. But I haven't used it yet. So what mic do I use? I use a Rode Procaster. Is my microphone. It's an XLR mic, and then I have a Rodecaster Pro mixing board. I have a couple XLR mics. I haven't had my wife on in a while, but we do a kind of a special that we did, How We Live the HVACR Life. If you guys haven't seen that, that's pretty cool. My wife and I did it where we just discuss different things, and she gives her honest opinion. It's on my channel. Just go to the playlist, and you can find the HVACR Life playlist. Let's see what else we got in here. Have I ever dealt with an R12 system? Yeah, I think I still have an active R12 system out there. Yeah, I worked a lot with R12 coming up in the trade. You got to understand that even though I'm only 38, I've been in the trade since I was like 8. Okay, I've been working with my dad since I was a little kid. So I came up working with R12, R22, R502. Majority of my start of my career was R12 alternatives. So 409A was our refrigerant of choice. We also used a little bit of MP39. We had a lot of fun converting those systems. They were a pain in the butt because the higher operating pressures of the 409A just wreaked havoc on our systems. But let's see what else. Any recommendations for an amp meter? I really like the Field Piece. SC480 is my favorite meter. No, never dealt with R11. Can I briefly explain refrigerant glide? Not really briefly, dude. I'm not very good at getting crazy technical with that stuff. All right, my throat is starting to get irritated, so it is about time for me to wrap this up. What comes out after 410 when it gets phased out? Christopher Rogers. Carrier's already got a replace. There's a couple different replacements that they're already talking about. I know Honeywell's working on a 410A replacement with Train. I think I just read like a service bulletin about that. They're like trying to figure out an alternative. So there's a bunch of different alternatives to 410A. We are going to wrap this up, guys. My throat is starting to get dry and irritated from talking so much. I really appreciate it. Those people in the beginning of the stream that won the Honeywell swag, make sure you send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll forward your information along to Ralph. Remember that I go live with my buddies on Friday evenings on the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel. We try to do that Friday evening, 6:05 p.m. Pacific. There should be a link in the show notes of this video for the Overtime channel, so definitely subscribe to that. And we are going to, I need to turn that off. We need to turn that on, and I'm going to transition the outro music. And I really appreciate you guys, and we will catch you on the next one.